opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
I think a new world order is emerging.
An inside job? How dare you? How dare you?
To create, so to say, mass-produced models of human beings arranged in some kind of a scientific caste system.
We shall go on to the end. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall never surrender.
Good day, everybody. This is UCY.TV. It's the 6th of August 2016. 4 p.m. in the Netherlands, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. This is the Solvinur event. I am your host, Walter Hendricks. At the website ucy.tv you can find the chat link. There's a few people there. Vince, Otto, Shirley, I think Juana Taco just entered 20 minutes ago. And to Anons, welcome. So what's up, everybody? How are you guys doing? I suppose in the United States the whole election business is what's going on in the news and stuff. So I don't, normally discuss news. You can call in if you like, but only via Skype at the moment. Contact me at Skype, Solvinur, SOLVINUR, and I'll get you on air. So yeah, this whole Trump, Clinton business, I think it's a waste of time commenting other than that these are puppets, and therefore, they shouldn't really be of that big importance. Not that these people are free of guilt, so to speak. But they're just the outer ring, right? It's the outer ring of Morning Hopper. How you doing, buddy? It's an outer ring of this system that is controlling society. So, other topics than this puppet show should be addressed. I'm not sure, though, what I'm supposed to be talking about at this moment anymore. Otto says, lol, sounds like Walter doesn't want to make America great again. Yeah. Yeah, there was this time, I think it must have been exactly like 8 years ago. And we were in this chat room, and it was filled with people supposedly consistent of truthers and liberals and free-minded people, whatever you want to call it, right? And all of a sudden this Obama hype, went on. And I swear, more than half of the people in the chat were Obama fans, And I was like, what? I thought you guys knew, right? Yeah, you haven't even pinched through the false left-right paradigm in politics that's going on. I was like, wow. Yeah. And so, you see that a little bit again, not as much as with Obama, but yeah, you find Trump supporters in, in circles that I tend to pay attention to, and I'm like, what? Yeah, it's insane. So, coffee. We should be getting into Brave New World Part 8. I'm not sure if maybe we can do Brave New World Revisited after that. I think it's better. Brave New World is just like an intro compared to that, I think. Juana, left-right paradigm, like two wings of the same bird, she says in the chat. And yeah, in Dutch we say the same. We call it vleugel, which means bird. Yeah, we got a linker, left, and a rechter, right wing. The word rechter, that's a funny word in Dutch. Right wing, I would translate into Dutch as rechter wing. But rechter also means judge. Yeah. Or if you say rechterkant, which means a right side. Right? So right in Dutch can also mean judge. Yeah. Funny, these words. I typed the one in the chat earlier. Society in Dutch is maatschappij. But maatschappij also means company, as in business. Yeah. See, it's funny how language does in these cases shows you a link, right? Good morning, Cap Gringo and Iota. Also welcome. How you doing, guys? Yeah. And I'm not sure whether Otto is trying to be funny here, or if he's really a Trump supporter. Yeah. Did you guys hear about these two people? I'm not sure. Is Sean? Sean is one name, and Thorn is the other name. I'm not even sure. Thorn is the last name, but that's Sean. I can't remember his last name. But they were found dead. And they seem to have been critical, let's put it that way, right, of Hillary. And this has been promoted by, I think it was AFP, not sure. Yes, Anon, we are listening to a live show. Yeah. Yeah, so guys, if you have Skype, contact me, right? Yeah, this is the Dutch Communist Party report on right now, says Otto. Yeah, great. Yeah, because this is, this is you guys' radio. That's also a reason why I have these 2 hours from Jules. She gave me these 2 hours on air for free, and you guys don't even get ads. Isn't that fantastic? And so, make use of this situation. Let your voice be heard. Contact me at Skype, SOLVIN, from Neo, UR, Solvinur. Doesn't matter, you can talk about anything. There was this one thing that William Roberts mentioned. You can listen to William Roberts at ucy.tv. Hold on, guys, I need to type something. If the front page from UCY has the current stream. Let's see. Maybe can anyone check that? Because it's not working for me. I'm sure of that. Okay, the streams are messed up. Not only from UCY, by the way. There's more. Okay. There's more internet streams that seem to not work. Hold on, guys. I need to scroll through here. Then right click. Then okay, there we go. This is working. Some people need to come online or update their Skype. Okay. I'll tell him that. So make sure you get the updated version of Skype, because somebody just tried to join and I can't let them join because it says Michael was unable to join because he needs to update his Skype. Okay, so maybe later. Where was I? Don't remember exactly. We were doing word games, right? Yeah, I was telling you about right wing and how language can sometimes show you links. In the Netherlands, I don't know exactly when this happened, but I think it's more than 10 years ago, or maybe 15, somewhere around that the term Holland BV, that BV stands for besloten vennootschap, and it means that it's a certain kind of company in which I should say the owner of the company cannot have his property be taken if the company goes bankrupt, right? So that's a kind of company. You also have a CV, which in that case you would be paying with your personal property in case your company goes broke, right? So those are two different kinds of companies. And they introduced, or they, I should say, I shouldn't use those words because I don't know who they are. But I'm sure this is what's going on. That's why I rather say the term Holland BV, I'm translating this now, Netherlands, Holland. Holland BV was introduced into our society. That's a better way of putting it. And it didn't, have such an impact on the Dutch people that they suddenly realized that they are part of a company or something. It just doesn't. It's not. Okay, hold on. It didn't seem to be that big of a deal, and I can understand that because we didn't have a notion of what freedom is in the first place. Invite. Let's see if it works. Nope, it's still not working. I don't know what's going on.
You there?
Yeah, I'm here.
I think it's working then.
It does work, but it's still giving me this yellow triangle with an exclamation mark. But yeah, I can hear you.
If we would elect Trump, he would solve this problem with Skype.
Yeah. Welcome,
man.
by the way. How you doing, bud?
I'm doing well. I really enjoy your show, and I appreciate the chance to yap with you because I find you to be logical to a fault, and it's really refreshing that you can discuss things without any sort of extraneous bullshit added to it. So I truly appreciate that.
Cool. Thank you.
And I think it takes guts to read Brave New World on air because it's almost like a technical manual.
Yeah. It's I'm telling you, I'm not totally scareless in the sense that I imagine some thugs from the government banging in my door and dragging me to some kind of psychic institution or something. Seriously.
They'll only come and bang on your door after you put the Hillary bumper sticker on your car. No, man, the politics here is horrible. It's horrible, and it's not just the politics of yay Trump or yay Hillary or anything. It's just beyond. Well, I'll tell you what. It's a wonderful study in propaganda right now. And it's a wonderful study in propaganda produced by the money men. That's really the interesting part. The biggest takeaway from this whole election is exactly how the information is monopolized and controlled
Yeah. Money is it controls what people know.
I think money's just the beginning of it. Honestly, because I think the money's fake, right? I mean, that's one of the reasons why this, going back to a current event, this thing with Iran and they're making kind of a stink over the $400 million. And, honestly, I don't care if we gave Iran $400 million. It was probably their money in the first place that we kind of somehow screwed them out of it in like 1980. But the great big uptake I got out of this was somebody on the radio was saying, on terrestrial AM radio was saying, and this was real money because it wasn't just American money. They couldn't just go and print it. This was euros and Swiss francs. It was real money. And I thought that was really kind of funny that they would bitch about the falsehood of our money when they actually had to pay real money to, the evil bad guys who've been 6 months away from a nuclear bomb for the last 23 years. Never mind the fact that they make oil and probably could have bought a bomb from Tajikistan or something when the wall came down, but whatever.
Yeah, but I don't think euros is real money either,
I think it's real money. The only thing that's real money is gold or a commodity.
Or, well, precious metals, or like land or something, or what?
Right.
Or,
Some sort of commodity, something that you can do something with, and yeah, like iPods are not a commodity.
iPod?
Like a cell phone or some sort of electronic media device. That's not necessarily a commodity.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Like honestly, like I think that when we went into Iraq, actually probably in Desert Storm, and then the second time in 2003 when we went back in, I think instead of blowing those people up, we could have just like airdropped them like Xboxes and LCD TVs and cell phones, and we probably could have had a greater effect for our nation instead of all the death and destruction. But that benefits the wrong financial class, I think.
Mm-hmm. Did I ever tell you what? Did I ever tell you about Pimford Town?
He was a lawmaker, and didn't he die?
Lawmaker? What do you mean lawmaker? What's that?
Well, he was somehow in the government. He was some sort of politician or something.
Yeah, he was a Dutch politician, and many people thought that he would be the next president. And he was shot down. And
was this they think it was the Mossad that killed him, and
the going conspiracy theory around that is that it was the military-industrial complex. I'm not sure about that though. The problem with the story, with the original story, is that they didn't even not mention this in the official story. That's why it's suspicious also. But the story is that this murderer came walking up to Pimford Town, walked around his back and shot 6 times. Right, and so you see with the forensic photos that were taken, you can see the places where they number these spots with little numbers, so that they see where the shell casings of the bullets, that's what they are called, right?
Right.
Come out, and
right.
But there were 7 holes in Mr. Pimford Town's body, and there was one such case also found 10 yards away on top of the roof.
That's very interesting.
And
because as I recall, Pim Fortune was shot with a .357 Magnum, which usually is a revolver, which means that the cartridges are contained within a cylinder. So you fire it, and that cylinder rotates, and it goes to the next cartridge. There's not necessarily a need to eject those cartridges unless you're reloading. And if you were going to do that, you wouldn't necessarily throw those cartridges on the ground to leave evidence unless you wanted to leave evidence.
Yeah, but so the 10-yard away cartridge on the roof suggests a second shooter. And of course, no information whatsoever to be found on this.
And you're kind of familiar with the JFK situation, right?
A little, yes.
Okay. Do you remember that there was, after the shooting, that Lee Harvey Oswald supposedly shot a police officer named James Tippett? Okay. In that story, that's very, very similar to that, because Lee Harvey Oswald supposedly shot J.D. Tippett with a 5-shot .38 caliber revolver, but then he dumped his shells at the scene. Like they're leaving a calling card. Now, I've shot for a while. I know a bunch of listeners have shot for a while. And if you're going to be of that criminal mindset, you're kind of aware that leaving these shoals at the scene would have, it's a gold mine of information leading right back to you somehow.
Huh. Yeah, and then this was in 2002 when this Pim Fortuyn was murdered. It was a political murder. And 2 years later, Theo van Gogh was shot down. Hold on, guys. I'm adding an unknown caller.
Oh, hi.
Hi, welcome to the show.
Yeah, Walter, is it?
Yes. Hi,
Yeah.
how are you?
Yeah, pretty good. I'm David. I'm out in San Francisco. Greetings from a foggy city. Hey, you know, I heard you talking a little about Iran there, and a lot of the talk shows have been talking about it, and I kept up with some of those issues. Out here in San Francisco, I work on energy issues, and the issue of that amount of money was not necessarily only related to the. I think there was people are claiming it was jet weapons, jet sales, but it was also hundreds or probably thousands, if not even hundreds of thousands of different accounts, because almost everybody's bank accounts, if you were an Iranian business that was, if you were dealing in pistachios, for example, pistachios is almost how they caught Oliver North. Some of the best pistachios in the world come from Iran, and if you were a pistachio wholesaler and you had an office in New York and a few other ports, your accounts were seized once those hostages were seized. And so it was not just some weapons sales or nuclear power plant sales or anything else that the Shah had arranged. It was virtually every dime of every Iranian business at the, this is 1979, were seized and have been locked up for over 40 years.
Huh.
So it's a pretty creepy idea that or going on 40 years, I guess it is, but the idea that these no, it's over 40 years, isn't it? So the idea that all of this money has been somebody's been cashing in on it, getting the derivatives, getting the interest on the accounts, and they haven't been able to develop their society is pretty profound. And so I am suspicious of the people who are complaining too much.
Okay. Did you get all that, Michael?
I did. I found it to be very interesting, especially in light of the fact that Iran has been removed from the SWIFT system, and the SWIFT is basically it's the numbers on the bottom of your checks. It's the system for worldwide interbank financial transfer. So, like the big money basically erased Iran. They didn't have any sort of way to operate within the world banking community.
Huh. Yeah.
So yeah, I think Iran, it's possibly their money. There's, anybody else. Yeah, you got to pay interest on stuff if you've taken money from somebody and you sit on it for a while or something like that. Yeah, I mean, any court would find that you owe them interest.
Sure. Hey, it sounds like I didn't realize you were keeping him on it. It's good I'm able to ask you a question. Are you familiar with the BRICS system that's being developed right now?
Right, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and then I think there's a provision for South Korea to come in, but I don't think they're going to because we kind of.
I thought it was South Africa, not South Korea.
I don't think South Africa's got the economy. They don't have the production. They might have like mineral wealth, but they don't have nowhere near the economy. I mean, they're all to a point of where they're going to be fairly much a Chinese dependent fairly soon.
Yeah, but that was the S of it. Yeah, Brazil, BRIC. So it was Brazil, Russia, India, China, and then whether S was South Korea or China or South Africa. But in any case, yeah, the reason I asked it, and it kind of tied to what you were just talking about, the removal from the international banking system, the Iranian money. As I understand it, after World War II, the United States was allowed, tied with the World Bank and the United Nations and the International Monetary Fund, to become the predominant currency in the world. And so everybody in the world that wanted to do exchange rates had to do it through the U.S. dollar. And so, you know, if you were in London and you wanted to go to France, you exchanged your money through the U.S. dollar first. And so it was supposed to be a system of stability, but there's been so much corruption, and now after, you know, 9/11 and invading the wrong countries and creating a security state, and you know.
See, but if you only invaded the wrong countries from your point of view, and I'm not advocating the invasion of any of these countries, but you actually have to look at it, I think, from the big money. And invading Iraq and invading Afghanistan and wherever else that we've like spread our seed, yeah, that's part of the money system.
Well, right. I mean, the idea that nobody wants to invest in America now, and nobody wants their currency to be tied to it. If we're going to be seen as a tyrant and a bully, then it's very important that people find out, you know, what other options they've got. So when we see Brazil, for example, with the Olympics, and there's this constant propaganda smear of Brazil, they're going to want to take part in BRICS. Well, we'll smear them. If Russia wants to take part in BRICS, we'll seem like we're going to war against them. China, India. India seems to be immune from it, but
well, that's because we need India. In the end, we need India because we don't have enough soldiers to throw against the big Chinese murder machine when it comes down to it. So to satiate that need, we're going to have to dump tons and millions of Indian soldiers into it. I mean, look, if you really look at it, China's got the one-child policy, right? And that all kind of came about in 71.
They retracted that now.
But,
yeah, I think they just a matter of months ago they swapped that out. But yeah,
They used to have.
Yes.
Yeah. Go ahead.
But they had that, and that came about in 1971 when Nixon went to China and basically opened up China to trade with America, which, you know, is a really lofty sounding description, but really what it was the decision that, okay, we're going to start moving American production to China and increase the profit, and, you know, put it to the little guy here in the United States. We're going to take his TV manufacturing job and send it to Wang, who makes, you know, 40 cents a day. So you've got the beginning of that one-child policy, which has led to, you know, the economic situation we're in, but it's led to another very, very interesting side effect where they've got like an imbalance in men versus women. So like if you were to play musical chairs in China with men getting a wife rather than a chair, you've got 25 million men between the ages of 15 and 50 that have no mathematical chance for a Chinese wife. So that's like quite a large number of angry, horny, frustrated men in the prime of their life. What do you do with them?
Oh, God. Well,
you give him a rifle and you tell Chang his wife lies in the West and it's his duty to liberate his new wife.
Well,
and if you die in the stress, well, you know, thanks. We needed that room.
That gets into the issue of whether or not. I mean, actually, I don't fear China as much as I fear the financiers behind it. If I understand right, 60,000 different factories left America in the last couple of decades, and that was not the Chinese that were, you know, financing that transfer. That was the those factories that split.
The regular
West. I couldn't understand both of you. What, that went to China and then?
Oh well, the owners of the companies were the ones that split. They decided to go with slave labor, and frankly, any of those 25 million guys, they're being polluted like no tomorrow. So, God knows if they're even healthy.
Yeah, we had the same here in Germany, for instance. The biggest steel factory, they wanted to get rid of that. And the Chinese, they gathered together a bunch of people. They teared the whole thing down and built it back up in China again, right? So this movement of industry from people that cost a lot of money in wages, like Western kind of people, to China, this is business. It's just business. That's what it is.
Well, it's actually a false financing, and as well, when you think about it, it's a false set of measurement of our lives.
Well,
so
yes, it is. I understand, but if you were a owner of a company and you knew that you would get more profits if you move your company to China, you would be an ass if you didn't, right?
Well, of course, we shouldn't buy anything from those that's manufactured by slaves.
The bigger question is, if you didn't move your factory to China, would you be able to obtain financing for the next year or the next crop of products?
Well, that gets into a whole other question, and this is what I had really, if I hadn't had the chance to talk with you, caller, I would have asked Walter if he was familiar with. There's a big bank that just got busted or exposed in a busting of, it's called the Hong Kong Shanghai Bank Corporation. And apparently for many decades, they've been doing money laundering for the drug cartels and probably terrorism cartels and all sorts of different, smuggling operations. So they paid a measly $1.9 billion. They were given something like 1,800 days to stop, and nobody is going to serve a day in jail. And then I think they get to keep their bonuses, but they have to wait a couple of months. And so it's bizarre, and so for decades, America has been looted by the crack epidemic, by the war on drugs. That if it was marijuana, that's kind of outrageous, and it's, all the way back to 1920s when 1/3 of America's economy had been based upon hemp, and then all of a sudden they outlawed hemp. So 1/3 of the American economy was crushed, which you could pretty well correlate.
Was it crushed or was it shifted? Because
well,
I truly
crushed.
don't think that there's no actual crushing or actual destruction. I think that there's more just a shift. It changes hands. Like when people say that, the stock market lost 600 points and there's, $3 trillion of value out of the stock market. There's no $3 trillion of value out of the stock market. It just changed hands. It's not in the same people's hands. Somebody else has that money.
I get your point, and I agree. But in the case of something like hemp, there was paper, there was high quality cloth, there was cheap cloth, there was rope, there was oils, there was silage, and that's actually more like barterable goods, and so it doesn't necessarily have to go through the Chicago Board of Trade or the New York stock market. And the idea that they simply outlawed hemp by they called it marijuana, and nobody had ever heard the word before, and said, okay, we'll outlaw marijuana, but they didn't realize that they were outlawing hemp. And hemp was 1/3 of the American economy. And to outlaw
and 1/3 of the American economy immediately shifts to the oil money, because everything made, pretty much everything that was made, production-wise, other than like the fabrics, which of course increases the cotton, and then the paper, which increases the trees and the lumber yards and the people in the forest. But everything else, it shifted that production to the oil-based economy.
Yeah, you're right, and that then got into the centralization. If America was smart enough to bust the trusts in the early part of the century, what did they do? What did the oil companies do but get even with us by getting together with Hearst and then forcing the issue so that they got their trust back by they might have been split up into 7 sisters, but we were all of a sudden stuck with a whole bunch of products, like plastic rope and nylon and all sorts of cloth that was made out of oil, and the hemp fibers that used to be not only biodegradable but pretty enduring in a lot of ways too, all of a sudden could not be used. And the whole idea of decimating forests to build or to put together trees, when in fact an annual plant could have done it far better and created a lot better topsoil, much less a whole variety of other crops, or things like silage. If you're going to use you're going to get multiple uses from the same plant, the same crop. And so the whole idea that the American economy was decimated by the outlawing of a plant like hemp, and we've then become so caught up in monopolies. The oil monopoly then develops their their plastics industry, which
and chemical industry for drugs.
Yeah, absolutely. Pharmaceutical is huge in terms of oil. Yeah, so there's so many different things that we're totally trapped by a monopolizing of everything, and to this day, California and Oregon and Washington and Colorado, a variety of states are starting to inch by inch get back into hemp production, but they're pretty much allowing it to only be used for smoke and reefer, as opposed to producing silage for cattle or oils and papers and variety of different cloths.
What's the most important rule of all is you don't mess with the money machine. You do not mess with the money machine, or you face the wrath of the United States military. I mean, that's what backs the American dollar, is the full faith and violence of the United States Marine Corps. We will park a goddamn aircraft carrier off your coast and bomb your cities.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. When I was a kid, or when I was 25, I ran for Congress in St. Louis on a platform of boycotting money, because it had gotten to be so phony even back then. This was at the time Jimmy Carter was in, and interest rates had gotten up to 22%. And so the idea that money was so imaginary, people were bartering and working better than dealing with money at 22%. So, just boycotting the money. If the fat cats want us to use some crazy number that's going to be shifting every 2 weeks, why bother? You can do better by barter. And so it's obvious that the baby boom and succeeding generations have been looted time and time and time again, simply because they keep their eyes on these fake numbers rather than setting a standard for themselves that they can live up to. It's like
the current United States debt is like $19.5 trillion. That's what the official debt is. That doesn't add up all the other encumbrances and the entitlement programs and everything.
Is
which,
that
if
the
you
debt
add
or the deficit?
The national debt is supposed to be 19.5 trillion. I think that the total national deficit comes out to be something like 427 trillion.
Yeah.
Can I ask some stupid question, please?
Sure.
To whom is this debt owed?
No.
Well, it gets into debt is supposed to be more like the bond issues as opposed to the trade imbalance. So if somebody's dealing in shoes and they owe the manufacturers in China, that's not on the backs of the taxpayers. That's in between the shoe manufacturer and the shoe distributors or whatnot. But if we're building roads and bridges with bond issues, and we're getting into international, we're allowing overseas investors to invest in America. That would be the national debt. But it's whether or not we're getting cheated.
Excuse me, David. One of my weakest points is economics, but and then this is also goes in my second language, English. So please forgive me, but for me to understand, these bonds, these can be bought by people like you and me, right?
Hypothetically, but you have to buy them in chunks of about $10,000.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So normal people wouldn't have these bonds?
Right. Right, yeah, you normally, and in fact, in the old days, I mean, like 200 years ago,
Yeah.
bonds were still seen as a kind of colony economics, where the king was usually able to suck all the money back over to London and leave each town, starving. So bond issues were seen as a very touchy subject. You didn't want like Saudi Arabia buying your bonds because they would basically own your whole town. And a kingdom owning your whole town again would be a pretty ugly scene. So
yeah, but that horse has already left the barn.
What was that, Michael?
The idea of you don't want Saudi Arabia buying up all that horse has left the barn sometime in the 70s.
Oh, I know, and that's gotten the danger because in the 1970s, interest rates on bonds were about 1.5%, and in fact, it was seen as a patriotic thing to buy bonds. It was like a patriotic thing to buy school bond issues or sewer bond issues or something like that. You were helping your town. You wanted to have local purchase of bonds so that it wasn't seen as New York was going to buy up every town around, that it was seen as a kind of a local patriotic thing, that a local person would reinvest in the community. And so, as Michael was saying, that it's gotten out overseas purchases has helped demand that the interest rates start going higher and higher. And so, in Jimmy Carter's day, the issue about interest rates just started going crazy. Nowadays,
but the answer to Carter's outrageous interest rates at the time. Oh, I shouldn't say Carter's outrageous interest rates, but the outrageous interest rates during Carter's time was to come in and have Reagan deregulate all the banks.
Right.
And that's what brought the interest rates down was the fact that he said, okay, well, go ahead and rob these idiots.
Well, and that gets into when you were talking about the $19 trillion debt. The last time I even bothered to pay attention to how much LIBOR was claiming that we owed them, and LIBOR, the London Interbank Offer Rate, which is how interest rates were set under Reagan, they now claim that we owe $550 trillion, and it it's total scam. They jacked up interest rates in a corrupt way, at least since 1989. LIBOR was created in '84, and they've been frauding the interest rates ever since. And now they demand that we owe them $550 trillion. So that's why I talked about boycotting money. These people are insatiable in their greed, yet the average person has to live in real, in real time, in real money.
Yeah.
And these people are dealing with fantasy numbers, and yet the real person has to live in real dollars.
But these, to come back to my question, like who are we supposed to owe all this money to, right? And then you started talking about bonds, and I understand now that it's like more like companies or something like that buy these bonds. Is that correct?
Well, hypothetically there are financial institutions that are marketing them, but it's even gotten into the point, and this is why I brought up that bank, HSBC, Hong Kong Shanghai Bank Corporation. They've been doing money laundering for so long, and UBS,
Bank of America does it. Bank of America.
B of A,
and Wells Fargo.
Wells Fargo, all of these guys, money laundering for the mob, and to the degrees of tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars a month.
Yeah.
And the idea that they've been churning trillions of dollars. They're not doing anything to reinvest in any of the local communities. They're simply churning money for churning money.
Yeah.
And it's as if the money has no purpose anymore other than for them to churn it. And the average person has to scrabble to get rent. And there's an insanity to even the belief system that this money has any value. And whether they talk about security systems to protect your accounts and whatnot, it's beyond the point of rationality. When NAFTA was put together, it was supposed to make this great big happy family of Canada, the United States, and Mexico, and it was supposed to raise the standard of living.
Wait up. When NAFTA was coming through, there were many voices that were against NAFTA. And if you go back to the 1992 presidential, the debates between between Bush, Clinton, and Ross Perot. Ross Perot gave the giant sucking sound speech, and it was like 6 minutes of the most truth that the nation had ever heard. And no, we got Clinton. You do not mess with the money machine. If you mess with the money machine, we will hang you on TV. We will bomb your country, and you will get stabbed in the ass with a knife until you die. Ask Gaddafi.
Right. Well, Gaddafi also had that sweet crude. They have such high quality oil there. That's what
Gaddafi was making the Pan-African dinar. He was going to make a gold coin that would circulate within Africa.
Well, you're right about that too. Yeah, and again,
all the oil is incidental. I mean, like if you look at like what's going on with ISIS right now, and the ISIS oil theft, and Royal Dutch Shell and their possible purchase of that oil, it's really, it's like 629 million, 650 million, maybe 1.1 billion. That's nothing, man. We fart that away on air conditioners in Afghanistan in a year,
Well, it's supposed to be more than that, because I don't know if you remember it, but right after the 2003 invasion of Iraq happened, apparently there was a weather forecaster, TV weatherman that had access. He had like access codes to the satellites, and he was claiming right away that there were pipelines being developed in southern Iraq within days after the invasion. He could see the work lights from these satellites, and they were going straight down into Kuwait, and this oil was not being metered at all. And so then John, was it Bremer, moves into Iraq shortly after. He becomes like the Sultan of, you remember Bremer was the...
Yeah, he was like the governor of Iraq, the provincial or temporary governor or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, he was Bush's college roommate, and he was given control of the nation, and he also turned off the meters. So we were basically sucking all of the oil out of Iraq for free. And what had happened prior to that invasion, to the invasion in 2003? What was the coalescing event? The catalyst for that invasion? It wasn't weapons of mass destruction. It wasn't Saddam was giving Viagra to the rapists or anything like that. It was Saddam had said, "I do not want dollars for oil anymore." He wanted gold, euros, Swiss francs, or silver. Sure, right. Yeah, and that gets back to that point. Yeah, that the U.S. dollar had become so untrustworthy with layers and layers of corruption that it wasn't seen that anybody in their right mind, any nation in their right mind, was going to have to try to disinvest in the U.S. dollar. And until we get back to some rational people in our government, we're going to have more attempts to destabilize. I shouldn't even say destabilize the dollar. Nobody in their right mind would want to invest in a kind of a currency that just goes insane. If you're like Walter, you probably you're familiar with the hyperinflation in Germany in the 20s?
Yeah.
The wheelbarrows full of money.
Yeah.
I've got my old grandfather's stamp collection, and if I remember right, it's 4 billion Deutschmarks for a postage stamp.
Yeah.
But this whole idea that In fact, it gets into whether or not the debt of the Kaiser was dumped on the brand new republic, the Weimar Republic. So the people who had been crushed and fooled by the Kaiser all of a sudden had to pay back the debt for the Kaiser's war, and that led to such privation and starvation and lack of reinvestment that it led to the rise of fascism. And so I actually started to wonder
was
whether
the rise of fascism an almost natural result of the influence of the moneymen? Because if you take a look at, like, let's say Winston Churchill, who was in massive amounts of debt in the days prior to World War II, and he received a loan of some sort, like, I think it was £750,000 at that time, which, like, translated out today is like $5.9 million, $6 million, $6.5 million, something like that. And within a week of getting that money, that loan from the mysterious unnamed benefactor, he declares war.
I've never heard that, but I actually, if you understand was it Prince Edward had to abdicate for the woman that he loved, but he was apparently he was in league with Hitler, and I'm actually wondering whether or not Hitler was in league with the aristocrats, the monarchy, to get their monarchy back. And they had to ruin the Weimar Republic, and then Hitler was going to be the person that ruined the idea of democracy. And
the Weimar Republic was destined to fail because the Weimar Republic comes on the heels of the Spartacist Rebellion, and the Spartacist Rebellion uprising. There was something like 200,000 dead Germans during that time, and they saw exactly who funded that. It was the same people who basically killed the Tsar and had turned Russia into the big Bolshevik mess. Those were backed by the banks. They knew it. And honestly, Germany had no gold. They had no gold from probably 1933 to 1939. They had none. They were robbed. The Treaty of Versailles was harsh enough to where it affected everybody. It affected the amount of milk a child got. The amount of milk a child got from its mother's own breast, because that milk was already assigned to somebody else in France or in England or something.
Have you kept up with this Dulles brothers? There's a new book about the Dulles brothers, and they helped write the Treaty of Versailles.
No, I'm not aware of that book.
It just came out about a year ago, and apparently the Dulleses, there's a lot of interesting material about the Bush family and how their war profiteering helped. The Bushes, as you may be familiar, their father, Prescott, or grandfather, George Sr.'s father, Prescott, but even Prescott's father was a guy named Sam Bush, and he was in league with Herbert Walker to do money laundering for Fritz Thyssen, who was the big arms and industrialist in Germany. There was the Krupp family, and there was also Thyssen. And so Thyssen didn't want to pay war reparations, and so the Bush family started doing money laundering for him. And Thyssen was the first person to give, I think it was 5 million Deutschmarks to Hitler, and he was the first industrialist to give such a massive amount. But the Dulleses were also in league with them, and the whole idea that whether or not they were trying to get the monarchy back, or whether they just simply liked totalitarian governments, because totalitarians, if you've got either, whether it's a king or a tyrant, they're usually so fixated. They're kind of like Trump. They don't study, they don't do the homework, and so they can get tricked very quickly, and so they can do massive purchasing programs which are dumb as rocks, and totally wasteful, totally unaccountable, and so it wastes the nation's monies to get involved with tyrants. And so whether the Dulleses and the Bush family knew this and didn't care who came to power, or whether or not Hitler was actually in league with we think of them as the Windsor family, but if I understand right, the Queen of England is really German, and I think it's
Saxon-Gothenburg, yeah.
Right, yeah. And so whether they simply wanted their monarchy back and they wanted some fool like Hitler to come along and ruin the very idea of a republic so that people would beg to get the monarchy back. So, I'm starting to think that was what the real plan was. But, perhaps it was simply like, I think Philip Agee, he's an early CIA guy that wrote a book about the real purpose of the CIA is to put dictatorships in power so that they'll spend their money foolishly, and like you're saying, big money just sops up all of that gravy, and the poor people just get poorer when a dictatorship has no wisdom for their spending programs. So, yeah, the idea of ruining the very concept of a republic, and that the people get to choose how to spend their own money.
Yeah. Yeah, I heard you say a couple of minutes ago, if we only had the good people in government or something to that effect. Is that correct?
Oh, sure. Honesty is the best policy.
Yeah, so a republic is also a form of government, right? Is that correct?
Well, sure. Yeah, that's when the people get to decide how to. I think the original expression was the social contract, that we're all in league together, and that we all have a contract with each other to make our lives better, as a total picture. So we make schools and roads and bridges and libraries.
Yeah. I'm sorry to burst out in laughs like that, but I don't know how long you've been listening to my show, but for instance, things like schooling are there to help create the culture that we live in, or help to sustain the system that we are under. That's what schools are for. Even 5,000 years ago, the ideas of school was not new. Also then, they would teach different layers of society in such a way that a caste system emerges. And the same thing is true today. We live in a society that is totally manufactured, including the government. I don't care what kind of form this government takes, whether it's Republican or, what did you say? Republican, right? Republiek, as we say in Dutch.
Well, totalitarian would be a dictatorship.
Yeah, things like monarchy. That. It doesn't really matter what kind of government it is, because, in my opinion, government is a contradiction, is in direct contradiction with reality. It doesn't have a basis in existence. It's a strange idea that people have.
Well,
that's what it is.
We're exposed to. I mean, right now we do have the opportunity to. I take it you're in Germany. I'm not sure where Michael is, but the idea that we're able to talk around the world and we're able to communicate ideas and advance civilization, so to speak, is a wonderful thing. It's just that, as Michael's been saying, big money doesn't like it if that's going to cut into their profits.
Yeah, sure. Oh, I'm not disagreeing that we are living in interesting times. And
it's not actually to cut into their profits. It's to cut into their management of other people's debt. They have all the money anyway. They have it all. They make the money. There's no way you can have more than them. They make it. So the goal isn't to control the money. The goal is to control other people's debts, the debts of entire nations. If you can control the debt, you can influence anything.
I'm sorry, yes. You're a bit breaking up for me. The goal was not to control money, but what?
The goal is not to control the money, but the goal is to control the debt. And if you can control the debt, you can control anything by influencing that debt.
Huh.
It's not the money. The money is all, they own the money, they make the money.
Yeah, they print it if they need it, right?
Much
Right.
less the
So
interest
it's not,
rate.
It's
Yeah.
the interest rate is once again, that's another manipulated and false item. I mean,
Right.
look, the interest rates, like you referenced Carter's time frame where the interest rates were 20+%. I remember that. I remember my parents buying a house in California at that time. I remember I learned a lot of new cuss words that summer because my dad was screaming about interest rates. So, I mean, I remember that. Yeah, really. I learned Dad was mad. I'd never heard Dad say words like that before. And within, 3 or 4 years of Reagan's time and banking deregulation, interest rates are down to like 8-9%. Now, that's unheard of. That doesn't happen. That's not a natural movement.
It wasn't that soon. It was probably in the late 80s, so it was almost 8 years before they got below 16%. There were people who were lucky to have 10% notes. But when I took financial management, they told us never, ever borrow money over 3%. You're getting into danger if you go over 3%. And for people to try to buy a house at 10% is, it's like 90% of the people will fail. And they did. And so they lost everything trying to have something which was standard. A lot of people don't realize it, but World War II veterans as well as Korean War veterans were able to buy a house at 1.5% on a VA loan, a Veterans Administration loan. And my parents, I think, bought their house at 3%. But for the baby boom to get suckered into 6% or 10% or 16%, they looted the baby boom, and we've never been able to recapture, the family farm or the family house. Those were lost decades ago, and succeeding generations have grown older and older without the ability to have anything stable. And it's created panic around the world where nobody, what the baby boom used to be able to expand, all of the ideas and inventions and creativity was just locked down into trying to protect their own nest, which they eventually lost.
Let me throw something at you. Maybe the baby boom was not supposed to do that. Maybe that time was done. And the baby boom generation and Generation X after that is the transition to the rise of the dragon. And I'll give you something that may sound stupid, but if you think about it, it might be quite impactful. And it was the actual non-adoption of the metric system. I remember as a child in school, we had to learn the metric system because the United States was going to the metric system, and we were going to be just like the rest of the world, and it was going to make everything better, and production and blah, blah, blah. Life will be better if we learn the metric system. That day came and went, and we've still got miles and rods and hogsheads, as we're measuring, how far you get in your Chevy with a V8. So maybe
I don't disagree.
When the metric system wasn't adopted, that was the official sign that they'd given up and that this place was ready for the scrap heap, that this place was ready to be cleaned out.
Well, yeah, if you're talking about big money setting their goals against us, but there's been a Facebook post recently.
But I mean, it's like deeper than that, right? Because it's not just like a looting, and it's more of an actual destruction. Now you've got okay. I spoke with a friend of mine yesterday, and he's actually in the process of moving his child from one of the school districts that's near me. His kid goes to school about 50 miles away from me, and it's in a school district of a city of about 65,000 people. And this is in a very traditional part of the country. This is America, and he's taking his kid out of that school district because they are no longer teaching cursive to those children. So you kind of like look at little things like that, and I'm not saying that those are the only two things, but it's more of a plan to loot this place, but it's a plan to absolutely destroy this place. And the best way to do that is to make the population dumb, to make them absolutely stupid, to have them give up their life's blood and their life's wish so they can chase, imaginary goblins on their telephone.
Well, what were you saying about that Facebook post, David?
Oh, well, there was John Ehrlichman was one of the henchmen of Richard Nixon. And there's a Facebook post with a picture of Ehrlichman, and he's talking about the drug war and how they were trying to break apart the hippies and break apart the blacks, and they were going to create a drug war with marijuana for the hippies and heroin for the blacks, and then put them all in jail, and then they'd be able to reclaim their 1950s kind of mentality again. And there were certainly comments that went with it, but the idea that
open-minded goal, though. I mean,
what was that, Michael? I'm sorry. Every time you start speaking, your microphone is set to low or something, and it automatically adjusts. So I can't hear the first words that you say. Could you repeat that?
I apologize for that.
No problem.
That sounds like almost too low of a goal, just to subjugate the minority, through the drug trade. That's think
pure culture creation, right? This whole drug business. It's very bad for people to use drugs like heroin and stuff like that. Yeah,
please don't use the drugs that do not carry profit for the corporation. Is the message really? But
yeah, exactly.
But the drugs aren't necessarily the only path to destroying the minority, or even who says that they even want to destroy the minority?
No, I don't think it has to do with the minority.
There's a great increase in the Hispanic population, whether you want to call it Mexican, Guatemalan, whatever. And I mean, it's to a point in the United States where there's more salsa sold in the United States than ketchup. And not that that's a bad thing or anything. I'll tell you, I've got Mexican immigrant neighbors that live across the street from me, and they are some of the hardest working people. And I would honestly take Chewy across the street as president over Trump or Hillary. I mean, the man runs a business that puts out a consistently good product. The place is clean. His kids are clean. And I never see him do anything worse than play his stereo sometimes a little late at night. That's the worst thing I've ever seen that dude do. So I don't know. It's not necessarily the destruction of the minority. Maybe it's to cause unrest that focuses resources, that drains away from the rest of society. I think everything is, honestly, I truly think everything is manufactured. I think the culture is manufactured. I think art, the art world, I think that's an absolute 100% absolute scam. I think that's a money laundering scam that you can't believe. I think those paintings that cost $3 million that you look at it and it looks like a monkey threw up on it. Yeah, no, that's not somebody appreciating somebody's talent and their efforts and all that. That's a cash transfer that can't be that has extra layers of security on it.
Sure. Well, where I was going to go with this Ehrlichman poster was, and it goes back to that bank that I was talking about, Hong Kong Shanghai Bank Corporation, that they had been money laundering for decades, and really back into the 70s at least. And if I understand right, actually, HSBC was the bank that the British were using to deal with the opium wars in China all during the 1800s. So this is probably a 200-year-old bank that has been basically doing, money laundering for opium trade for centuries. And so the idea of if there was a decision, like as you go to the metric days, that to dismantle America, then the drugs, if they were going to create a whole bunch of unemployment in America, then to divert attention through drugs and then create an industry of private jails so that the very people who are selling the opium then get to reinvest in the privatized jails. That's a plus for the corrupt. So
Do you think that same influence that you're speaking about right there is only limited to that? You see, what I'm getting at is it's such a multi-edged blade that if you look at like the explosion of drugs in the private prisons at the time frame you're also looking at, you got to look at things that happen in the culture, and that was like the explosion of gangster rap music.
Oh, but that was somewhat planned as well. I mean, gangster rap. I took theater management. I've worked in theaters for years, and you know the politics of the development of that kind of music to scare the little old ladies so that they would vote for some of the worst tyrants, nationwide. That was a big part of what they were doing. There are plenty of people, in the black community that were shocked then, and they're still shocked. So, the pretense that there was any amount of, it wasn't revolutionary talk. It was just bloodthirsty. It was as if Oliver North and his ilk. I don't know if you're familiar with Oliver North had been doing so much cocaine smuggling that they can find his autograph on 50 tons of pure cocaine into Los Angeles alone. And so when you then transmit how the percentage of they only put a tiny bit of cocaine into crack, so you can magnify that 50 tons into maybe a few thousand tons of crack, and the decimation of the home ownership in L.A. alone, or in California alone, when their kids are arrested with crack and mom and dad have to put up the house for bail.
I was in Los Angeles in the '80s as a child, and I lived in the Covina area, which I don't know if you're familiar with the Los Angeles area, but it's one of the suburbs. It's in the San Gabriel Valley, and as a child, my parents got the Los Angeles Times, the newspaper, and I remember that within a week, there was crack was on the cover of Time magazine. It was on the cover of Newsweek, and the Los Angeles Times had run like a week-long special about crack. And then after that, it was nothing but crack in the media. Crack was the Bin Laden of that time.
Right. Yeah, so it was a PR scheme, actually, and when you look at how many houses were lost to it, so you've got HSBC who's doing the money laundering.
At that same time, I remember advertisements for housing developments that would have gone on in the valley that would have been like out near the San Fernando Valley, and trying to they were aimed at people in the inner cities. They were aimed at black families to get them to move out to these new subdivisions that went in, and then the industry around them never profited, and now you had to make an 80-mile commute back to your old job.
Right. Well,
so yeah, the theft of the property is absolutely there, but I mean the theft of the property is inherent in the financing and the playing with the interest rates. I mean, none of the banks that during the last mortgage crisis thing in 2008 with all the houses being repossessed, not one of those banks lost any kind of physical actual money. The money was ones and zeros, and in fact they all profited because they got whatever payments were made, and then they actually ended up with the property, and those losses are write-offs.
Exactly, and to me it was fraud to begin with. So the very concept of the money to begin with has been frauded for decades, and it used to be that money reflected your reputation. That if you were a hard worker, if you were cautious and thrifty, you would make a big pile of money, and that would be the value of your life. But if somebody came along and stole it, does that mean that they steal your reputation? So the ability to steal somebody's reputation has been a real problem for decades, for centuries actually. And the idea that a person can't keep their reputation if we turn it into numbers, somebody can always take those numbers away from us. But it doesn't mean that you've lost your reputation. So it's a sad insult to humans to really think that they're civilized if they're allowing their lives to be manipulated by numbers which can be stolen. And so you look at neighborhoods, you've got good neighbors and bad neighbors, and people who will develop, just by their, interactions, they're going to make a better neighborhood, and they're going to, help, do the variety of different things to make a community strong. And but then you've got the people who, like these HSBC, there are banks that have been manipulating us for centuries, like this HSBC, and when they get caught, they get 1,800 days to stop. And they get to keep their bonuses if they wait an extra month. It's preposterous that humans can call themselves civilized and allow a company like that to keep their business license. In fact, it gets into a little thing. Trump has got his campaign manager is a guy named Manafort, Paul Manafort. And for many years, Manafort was managing, he was a publicity man, a PR guy for dictators. He had Marcos, he had a variety of dictators around the world that he was managing their publicity issues. And to imagine that you could give a business license to a guy like that to manage the lives of dictators, and now he's actually got a business license to manage the life of a guy who is claiming to be the next great leader of America. I mean, it's preposterous that America is even giving a guy like that a business license, much less allowing him to run around without being in prison. Because every one of these dictators ended up murdering vast amounts of people. And, so here's a guy that's the PR agent for a guy like that. And we're still allowing a guy like Manafort to run free. And this guy is able to spin stories in the press to pretend that Trump is sane, or that the world needs more weapons, or the world doesn't.
Do you think that people actually think that Trump is an answer, or that Trump is just a great big flashing neon none of the above sign, that any change is better than the current path? Do you think that people actually think like?
I know that there are people that believe that, but it's at this point, the guy's ready to run right off a cliff just because he says he's so erratic he doesn't even have a bit of common sense. But the idea that throwing away other good candidates.
It's the result of a guy who's honestly he's in his 70s and he's been under attack for 9 months nonstop. I mean, just if you look back recently at the last thing, this Khan guy and the Gold Star moms. CNN ran 96 hours nonstop of, oh my God, Trump was evil. And I think if you put a guy under that much strain, yeah, he's going to crack. He's going to say stupid shit. But I'm not defending Trump. What I'm looking at the whole thing is I think people are becoming a greater number of people are becoming aware that your vote doesn't matter. This is actually kind of gone to increase those numbers, but those people rapidly morph into the people who figure out this is all a scam.
Well,
and
it is, and this is...
Those people morph into the people who do not vote and actually want for the system to burn.
It's a scam, but in a different way. Have you ever... Mussolini was the first person to describe the corporate state. And it's Mussolini and Rocco's treatise on the corporate state. And the way he describes it is there's a round table, and the economy is made up of monopolies. So you would have the trucking monopoly and the shipping monopoly and the dairy monopoly, and you'd have all these different types of monopolies. And the people still get an ability to elect a representative at that round table, but it's the people in the round table want the people to elect an idiot, and the people would need to have somebody smart, and so the ability for the republic to continue is basically almost impossible, because for the people's representative to have any power, they almost have to be a dictator. And for the round table to make sure that we elect an idiot also means the ruin of the nation. So it's the very concept of the corporate state is preposterous to begin with, because it starts with monopoly. And everybody in their right mind knows that monopoly is a bad idea. So, but if you look at, as you're describing, the big money people are monopolies, and they've been monopolies for way too long. And in fact, the numbers, what was it, when George Bush Jr. came in 2000, Ralph Nader was talking about 2% of the population own 90% of the wealth. Well, now it's 0.1% of the population owns 90% of the wealth worldwide. So these fat cats have gotten so fat that they're all type A personalities. They're all egocentric, and they don't do their homework. So they're putting themselves in positions of power which require skill and ability, yet they're so egocentric they believe their own crap, let's say, and don't do the homework, and they just bark out orders, and
I'm not sure it works that way.
I don't believe that.
Michael, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I'm sorry.
No problem. I think that, for instance, when people claim that government doesn't work, right? I think they're making a big mistake, because I think government is doing exactly what it's supposed to do, and it's not that people in high positions are stupid people, because even if you have a guy like Reagan, right? He was a president, right? So here in the Netherlands, people didn't think very highly of him he is intelligent or something, right? You know, that doesn't matter, because if you are in the government, you have enough money to hire the best people to evaluate the situation and come up with a solution. But of course, these solutions are not in line with what the people want, right? This has more to do with keeping the institution of government in place and creating culture, right?
Well, the only thing I would disagree with on that is the dollar value. So, for example, in government, even here in America, I think the president, what does he get, about $400,000 a year? But his travel budget is $50,000 for the entire year, and you can't even, if that jet, probably takes $50,000 every time it takes off. So it's the idea that that big business is a multi-trillion-dollar operation, and the U.S. government is still only about 3 or 4% of the gross domestic product. So the idea that politicians are the ones that give permission for business to move. So if a business wants to pollute the river or put a smokestack belching fumes in town, it's the politician that gives permission to do that. But the company is the one that is actually doing the polluting. So it's the authorization to do things is what government does.
Yeah.
And so it's the once we give business too much, then they don't care what government says. They're just going to keep doing it. And in fact, we're seeing that all through the country. There have been vast pollutions like the BP oil spill.
Yeah.
The government doesn't have anything. They don't have health departments. The Coast Guard doesn't have. The Coast Guard didn't even have cameras to verify whether or not the oil spilling out was the only amount. They relied on British Petroleum to provide the cameras for that. They didn't have operations to clean up the oil as it was coming out, or skim it, or capture it as close to the belching out of the waters. So, and other types of pollution coming down rivers, or different. The health departments in the states or counties almost don't exist because they're too small to deal with some of these problems. So
what you're talking about is like how Mussolini described fascism. I think it's
Right.
like government in bed with companies,
Corporation,
right? Corporations. And what was this Glass-Steagall Act that was repealed? Can anyone explain that to me?
I
Well,
can't.
Yeah, Glass-Steagall, if I remember right, was it used to be that that certain types of companies couldn't, in other words, you would have a certain kind of company like a ratings agency to rate stocks and bonds.
Yeah.
You wouldn't want that ratings agency to be owned by a bank or to be owned by a stock market company.
Yeah.
That would be a conflict of interest.
Yeah.
And so there are hundreds of different kinds of companies that you don't want, owning each other. It becomes not only incestuous, but it's dangerous because they create such a monopoly that there's there's almost no logic to it, and then there's it becomes almost like a money laundering operation, and nothing is ever done.
Yeah.
And so the Glass-Steagall Act, if I understand right, was protections against different types of corporate mergers.
Mm-hmm.
And so they outlawed the Glass-Steagall Act, and all of a sudden you had companies, like, for example, we have a media monopoly here that's getting larger every year. And there was one company was called Clear Channel. And Clear Channel started out owning billboards, and I think they had a few auditoriums. Well, they were allowed to buy radio stations, television stations, theaters, billboards, and then they got into managing bands. Now, if you, in the old days, in the 1950s in America, there was a big scandal called payola. And
Called what?
Payola.
Could you please spell that?
Yeah,
Sorry.
Payola.
Okay.
It was a scandal called payola. And if I was a manager of a band, say like I was the manager of Elvis Presley, and I went around with $50 bills, and I went to the radio stations and I paid them $50 to play Elvis Presley music. Well, that was against the law. Well, it was a bribe to create false interest. The bands should be able to stand on their own for their honesty and good quality music. And so now payola is now a standard in America when a company like Clear Channel not only manages the bands, but they own the radio stations. They also own the theaters. They also own the billboards. They also own, all sorts of other, like, electronic advertising on your computer and things like this. And so Clear Channel now has taken payola to such a level that they're paying themselves. If the band plays in a stadium that they own, and their music is played on a radio station they own, all of the money generated from that band just makes that corporation richer and richer and richer, and it doesn't do anything for the local community, and it becomes the biggest problem in 1776 with the king in America was that the king was always sucking all of the money back to London, and the colonies were starving. So the idea that a company like Clear Channel can generate all of this interest, all the kids are listening to this music and buying tickets, but that money just gets sucked out of town and goes to the corporate headquarters, and nobody ever sees it again. And so now it's even worse in that in America, up till about 1998, no company could own more than 3 radio stations total in America. And they deregulated the media, though, first under Clinton and then under Bush Jr. And so now Clear Channel, well, at the highest, I think Clear Channel owned 1,200 stations and then managed another 800 more, so that's about 2,000 stations. And you can, a single company can have 8 radio stations in one city. I mean, can you imagine that? 8 stations in one city. And so it becomes total propaganda. That not only does this one company create false interest, so that whether it's country and western music or rock music or rap music or classical or jazz or anything else, or talk radio, it's all managed by the same company, and then they suck all the money out of town. So it's when in the old days when no more than 3 stations could be owned nationwide, there was very difficult time to have a colony through the media.
Yeah, you start getting into like Clear Channel and the ownership of Clear Channel and like their dominance. It starts getting into like a media control issue, and it's not necessarily representative of the American people or American interests. As a matter of fact, the owner of Clear Channel is Russian, right?
His name is Mays. I think they've been in Texas for
years. Isn't it Tylerman?
Well, I don't know if it got bought recently. It's iHeart now. They changed their name because Clear Channel is becoming too obvious. But the other thing about it is that when you start getting into opinions, so for example, with how many talk radio stations they owned, they used to have probably 100,000 different employees in say 2,000 stations. There were at least 100,000 employees for 2,000 stations. There were, whether it was the janitor or the front, the front secretary or the engineers but they've now consolidated it, and most of these stations are robots. There's no human being in the station. They're just playing.
No, they use a program called PCDJ, and yeah. Now, when you get into like the death of the talk radio in the United States, like especially like on the AM, there's relatively few left-leaning programs. There's nothing like UCY on AM terrestrial radio, and the conservative radio seems to be slanted in a very blatantly obvious pro-Zionist platform. Some of the bigger talk names are actually openly pushing for war with Iran.
I'm hesitant to put it in those terms, but they are very blatant.
But if you were to take, let's say the top 3 talk radio names, or let's say the top 5, it would be Rush Limbaugh, Glenn Beck, Mark Levin, Sean Hannity, and maybe I'm sorry.
Some other dolt.
Right. Some other large name. Of those guys, they all will happily endorse a war on Iran.
They will happily what?
Endorse a war on Iran. They will happily send some other person's child to go die for interests that do not mirror the American interest at the very, very least.
Yeah, and in fact, they're chicken hawks. Almost every one of the guys you named got draft deferments from the Vietnam War. I think Rush Limbaugh had boils on his butt. But the issue of whether or not the 100,000 people had 100,000 different opinions, and they fired almost every one of them and replaced them with those top 5 that you're looking at. And in fact, Clear Channel is actually in really bad financial straits right now, because what they've been doing, in a bad economy, a local-owned radio station was able to actually save the economy by bartering ads. So if you were a little gas station and you couldn't afford to buy an ad, you might give, $50 or $100 worth of free gas to the radio station every week to be able to run a few ads for you. The laundromat could do it. The shoe shop and all of the different local stores around town could barter things to the radio station to help survive in the bad economy. But with the corporate radio, they want cash, and that cash has to go to the corporate headquarters. So all of the little businesses around the area are dried up because the corporate radio station doesn't barter. They don't negotiate. An ad is, $400.
But that's also working in collusion with more federal interests as well. I mean, now in the United States, there's digital radio everywhere. You cannot get television broadcasts unless you're a border town without a digital, ready TV or a digital, scrambler box. Pretty soon AM radio is going to be gone.
Well, we can. Those transmitters will still exist, so it's up to people to actually give up on it. But I know enough people in the pirate radio scene that it's easy enough to do that. But the opportunity is really there to just take away the business license of these creeps, because they're you had mentioned that these were liberals, but it's actually not even liberals. I took financial management. I know enough not to put all my eggs in one basket, but these politicians and these politicians keep authorizing monopolies. So, for example, whenever there's a corporate takeover, it requires the government to agree to the takeover. And so who in their right mind would say that it was a good idea to put 8 radio stations in the hands of one company in one city? It's just, it doesn't even make conservative sense to have.
But it makes sense if you figure out what the message that has to be deployed is.
Well, but conservatives, if you're into self-preservation, you don't want a monopoly. Like, for example, I just read a piece the other day about Dick Cheney's investments. And that guy is actually investing in the downfall of America. He's got basically invested in, I wish I had the article in front of me, but there are like put options that you can do on the exchange rate of the U.S. dollar. And in fact, there's another company that the Bush family is involved with called the Carlyle Group. And the Carlyle Group is, in their own prospectus, their own business plan, is to buy companies in distress. So if they put an idiot in government to ruin the economy, then they'll create a whole lot of businesses in distress. And so then the Carlyle...
I'm going to have to disagree. I don't think they're putting idiots in place. I think they're putting well-paid operatives in place. I don't think any of these people are idiots. I think they may have the appearance of an idiot. They may have the appearance of adult, but no, they're not idiots, not by any means. They may have many, many other weaknesses. They may be alcoholics. They may be perverts. They may be pill freaks. They may be cocaine addicts. They may be methamphetamine heads. They may be, transsexuals. They may have whatever other, flavor of disagreeable, but they are not idiots. And this is not a mistake. This is not falling apart due to mismanagement. This is falling apart because this is the plan.
Yeah, sabotage. I wouldn't disagree with that, and that kind of gets into the original discussion of whether or not Hitler was in league with the monarchy, and that the monarchy wanted republics ruined. And by ruining the reputation of a republic, all of a sudden people would beg to have the monarchy back to have the Kaiser back. And so it as far as it was a win-win situation, I kind of think. That's why.
But I almost can't follow the Hitler was working to get the Kaiser back, because the Kaiser was in his mid-80s when he abdicated, right?
Well, there's still the monarchy. See, the what was the Germans? Sax. What's their last name? I always heard it was the Hohenzollern. Right. So to look at, they had plenty of kids that they could replace the Kaiser with, but they wanted the monarchy back. And Europe had been losing monarchies for a couple of centuries, and they didn't want to lose any more. So to make sure that the monarchy was reestablished was part of their game plan. I mean, that's my perception of it. I can't prove it, but I think there's enough evidence to show that King Edward was selling weapons to Hitler. He was giving state secrets to Hitler, and he was basically, why would, if Hitler had basically helped run out the Kaiser, why would another monarch be interested in working with Hitler? So King Edward had a lot of explaining to do, and unfortunately he's no longer with us to tell his story. But well,
I'm not sure if there is anything to be explained here. Selling weapons to your enemy, that's just business. That's what it is. That's just business, man. Business doesn't care about war.
Lend money to the other side. Well, and that again gets into that whole issue of whether or not they were intending to ruin the reputation of republics. Megalomaniacs, dictatorship.
I don't think it has anything to do with that. It has to do with the amount of influence and control that the bank has. They're not worried about the money. They own all the money. They make the money. If they need more, they'll make more. They can control what the money's worth. They don't care about the money. They care about controlling the debt. With the debt, you can run the country. And there's a huge difference between the money and the debt.
Oh yeah, sure, yeah. Hey, I'm going to have to get going, but it's good talking. Walter, you're only on Saturdays?
Yeah, this is a weekly program. I did ask Jules to give me the phones, and so indeed people can call in nowadays. I hope this goes well every week. I think so.
Yeah, well,
and usually I don't talk about things like economics. It's one of my weak points. I'm more of a philosopher and a logical fallacies detector. So let's just put it that way. But I'm very glad you called in. It was a very good conversation. Thank you very much.
Oh, my pleasure. And good talk. And it's Mike, right?
Yes, sir, David. Hey, I enjoyed speaking with you. It was really nice.
Yeah, no trouble. Hey, by the way, in a future show, are you familiar with the ancient three estates, Walter?
The ancient what?
Three estates.
The ancient three estates?
Yeah, in other words, like the printing press has been called the fourth estate. Are you familiar with that?
Are you trying to make me think of three branches of government, executive and things like that? Well,
it's sort of, but the printing press had been called the fourth estate centuries ago, because it was as if you could print the truth, and you could hold it in your hand, and you could hand it to people, and you could hide it under a rock, and it'd last for centuries. The ancient three estates before the fourth estate was the king, the military, and the church. And so they were three different types of powers that were always vying for power, but they would always back each other up. And so it's sort of like we've been talking about, in fact, Michael there, as he was wrapping up there, he was sort of alluding to the same thing, that whether it's the money power or the military power or the religious power, they'll always swoop in. You know, if money's in trouble, the military or the church will, be glad to take over for them. But the ancient three estates have always been, interacting with and without each other for years, and for centuries, actually eons.
Yeah.
And so the idea that we can buck that system, but we have to look at it logically and how to do that best is, and so maybe they'll do that on another call.
Yeah, sure, buddy. Thanks a lot for calling.
Oh, my pleasure. Good week.
Awesome. You still there, Mike?
Hey, Walter, thank you very much. I'll let you do your thing. That was a whole lot of fun.
Indeed it was.
A lot of kind of outside the box conversations. Something to think about. Thank you.
Was very good. Thanks
All
a lot, Mike.
Absolutely.
Well, that was awesome. The last thing that David mentioned was he explained to me the three estates. I never heard of that. We don't get good schooling. The king, the military, and the church, and also, of course, money power. He also mentioned a little in the last remarks, and it reminded me of the Indian caste system, which also speaks of the top two of those castes as priests and military. And in this society, as it still exists in India today, the king is part of the military, is part of what they call kshatriyas. Those are the military. And the church, that would be the brahmanas. They are they stay at the top. That's why the priests were the ones that crowned the king. I think I told this once before, and I still don't remember exactly, but there was one king. It might have been Louis XIV, but I'm really not sure, that had the guts, or Napoleon, I'm really not sure, that had the guts to crown himself. And that was really, in the school that we had, was pointed out that was a rebellion act or whatever it was, because, that was not supposed to be done. It is the brahmanas, or the priests, at the top. Today, those are the scientists. Then the military. This kshatriya is the military. This layer has grown immensely. We've talked a lot last 2 hours without interruption, I might add, by ads. So go to ucy.tv and scroll to the bottom for a donate button. But you've heard how the media has been influenced to such an effect that the message getting out from the media is, went from, what is it, 1,000 opinions to 5, right? With this Clear Channel business, and I heard they changed the name was changed, so check that out. I heard him say it, but I couldn't really understand it very well. I especially didn't interrupt. Some things that, I would like to go a little bit deeper in. I think Otto pointed at one of the things is that it's the message that's being get out. And that is the ultimate goal, of owning all these outlet stations, as Clear Channel does. It's to be able to propagandize with one voice and to drown, little radio stations like UCY.tv. And so the media has now become part of that controlling mechanism, as the military is also. And schooling is also part of that control system. It's a condition. You could better use the word conditioning center. That would be more Huxley-like, right? It's a conditioning center. That's what it is. And in India, they have the people so far conditioned that they think that it's nature that's doing that. It is not. It is other people. They are called culture creators. What's his name again? Edward Bernays is a very good example. There are many more. Huxley also. These people are into mind control. That's what this is about, basically. In the chat earlier, somebody said, I don't know exactly who, I think it was Iota, and she said it's all about control. And I totally agree. I don't think it's about the money, because, they have enough of that. It's the normal people that care about money because they don't have enough of it, And so it's about control. It's about control of your mind. They don't use change anymore. We used to have in our history lessons at school, they used to show us pictures of how people were in chains, and we enslaved them, and the Dutch made a lot of money on that. Yeah. Check out the Anglo-Dutch establishment. It's we were ruthless. So, no worse or better than today with what one would call crony. I think you guys call it crony capitalism. So, this system that we live in, it has existed for so long that it's way too long ago that we were a free people. And that's one of the things that is hard to talk about, especially for me. I've been indoctrinated as much as anyone else here in the Netherlands through schooling. The only thing that I had going for me is that I kept asking questions, and I didn't accept certain things if they didn't seem logical to me. And that helped me later on in the process of waking up, right? So, but this system that we live under has been so long that there is no time in history or prehistory. Of course, history starts when we started writing things down, but there is also a prehistory. And yeah, maybe it's possible that we were even then controlled already as groups of people are controlled. And when I'm saying mind control, I don't necessarily mean one person. This is about groups of people, and groups of people act differently than individuals. Those are two very different studies. Groups of people act very differently, and they know, they've studied us for so long. They know how we react to certain things, so they can use a Hegelian dialectic to steer us in any direction that they wish. So that has been the Solvinur event for this week. It was awesome. Thanks a lot for listening, everybody. Thanks people in the chat at youthfly.tv, Captain, Cowboy, Dan, Grammy, Grump, Jay, Joe, Parna, Meticlus, Otto, Shirley, Vince, and 4 Anons. Thanks a lot for listening, everybody. I'll be back next week. Take care.
An inside job? How dare you? How dare you?
To create, so to say, mass-produced models of human beings arranged in some kind of a scientific caste system.
This is Ozzy Skateboard, and you're listening to UCY.tv.